Nomasonto and Glovo, a great industry stalwart, and somebody who brings an incredible energy and insight to our sector. She's the CEO of Limpopo Parks and Tourism. So Santo, thanks for being with us. We have Evelyn Klockman with us, who is the SATSA chair in Limpopo and runs Kukumini. Am I not pronouncing that right? Kukumini Safaris. God, get me tongue twisted to start with. She's with us from Zanin. We have Lisa Sherd, who heads up Krugerlovel Tourism and also owns Misty Mountain, Crosscourt Glass Elevator, Fingers in Many Pies. We also have Philip Bourdin with us, who's the CEO of Echo Africa, and also a great stalwart in the industry. And then, like a wise opa in Michel Girardin, who I've known for many years. He knows me as Davy, I know him as Mish, and he's with us from Juma. We welcome you as well, Michelle. So, guys, just to really sort of pull together at the outset what we are trying to do in this process. I think that in the initial 30 days, I mean, in retrospect, I call it the deer in the headlight phase. I think we were all really in a state of shock. And a lot of the activities that we undertook at SATSA were around the immediate issues, repatriations, looking at the UIF and tours thing, helping with people, around that. We pulled a whole lot of protocols together, which have recently been released by the Tourism Business Council. But it's really now incumbent on us, and I think everybody is, what does recovery look like? Will we be able to sustain ourselves in terms of what those timelines look like? So it's difficult to do strategy by committee and do it by absolute democracy, but we put into play, at least on the inbound side, a process where, and we've had a number of webinars, and the guys with us today are here really as thought leaders to catalyze and to salivate and to get the juices, creative juices flowing about what needs to go into that recovery process. So we are going to collate all the inputs that we receive. I'm just going to share a screen here with you from this process. And what we are doing, guys, is this is going to funnel upwards. So we on the inbound side, it's going to funnel upwards into the Tourism Business Council's Marketing Committee, which I chair. There's a similar process underway with domestic and outbound, and we're going to have a similar process on aviation and access. So it's important that we get your views, we get your submissions. I think that what I want to give people a sort of sense of comfort, I mean, it's important to get your view in here, but ultimately, guys, we can't take a 3-volume thesis to government. We need to have a 2-pager. We need to focus on what are the 6 key areas and key issues that we can hang our hats on in terms of accelerating the recovery sort of process. So in essence, that's the process that's underway. I really want to commend Cisa and Shauna and his team at SAT for embracing the partnership. We now have a structured modality that we can feed into, which wasn't there in the past, but we now have a really robust partnership in which all inputs will go into the top. So if you have a more substantive input beyond the webinar process this afternoon, please send it to us. Try and make it no longer than 2 pages. Send it to communications@satsa.coza. That will go in. We're collating those early next week. And in fact, our first inbound working group with SAT is taking place next Thursday. There's an absolute sense of urgency here. And I want to really just communicate that to everybody who's on the webinar with us this afternoon. So without further ado, let's get away from the PowerPoint and let's get into the substance and the wisdom of the panel. So I'm going to go around and just ask all our panelists just for an introductory remarks and comments. You know, everybody's been thinking about this. You would have applied your minds. Give us a bit of a teaser about what the key issues that you're going to be talking to today as the webinar unfolds. So, Nomasonto, let me kick off with you and look forward to your insights.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me nicely. Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much to SATSA for inviting me and to be part of this esteemed panel. Without giving a lot away, because I've spoken on so many of these things, for me, I think the key word that I want to throw out there first and foremost is the word that is adaptability. Because if you look at what's going on, it's easy for us to talk about recovery, but in what format? In what business format is it going to be? In what operation format is it going to be? Who are we going to be targeting going forward with all the changes that are coming through? The second word I want to throw into the mix is innovation. I think we have been forced into a corner of rushing into these digital platforms and trying to communicate and to really catch up, but it's also a huge opportunity going forward. The last word I want to throw into the mix is connectivity. So I don't want to give it away, but I'm going to talk around those three things, David. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sandra. Evelyn, let's come to you and give us your introductory comments.
Thank you, Dave. I'm very fortunate to sit at the bottom of that mountain that David's got at the back of his computer screen. I live in Zanin and on a big blueberry farm, so I've also been very fortunate to have some space during this crazy lockdown that has been very overwhelming. Yeah, I chair the Limpopo province for SATSA on behalf of SATSA, and my company is called Kukumi. Kukumi. What I would like to chat a little bit more about just now is our consumer confidence in the destination and in us as operators and as products. Because I think that's also going to be a big key point to recover and to be on that runway. Apart from the province itself, how ready we hopefully are for the first phase of recovery, the domestic tourism. And later on in the webinar, I will hopefully make I will make a very excited announcement for something innovative, Nomasantu. You just refer to it. We're busy being very innovative, and I'll announce a little bit something exciting later about that.
Great, thanks, Ev. And let's sort of do this on a bit of a provincial basis. So staying in Limpopo, Michelle, why don't you give us your introductory thoughts?
Sure. Okay, again, ditto what everybody says. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this prestigious panel. Dave, I was thinking about, what perspective do all of us talk from? What product or sector of the industry? And I, by no means, am here to speak purely on behalf of Juma, which I'm working with at the moment. I also do not presume to speak on behalf of the safari industry, but part of a collective within Limpopo and Mpumalanga and the greater Kruger Park. I think the first thing, and it leads on, Santa already mentioned it as one of her three points, was connectivity. And for me, I think South Africa traditionally has come from a background of people doing things within silos, be it anti-poaching, be it tourism marketing, be it on whatever. And I think this gives us a great opportunity, be it forced or otherwise, for the coming together. And I commend SATSA as being a catalyst for a number of people in the industry to pull together the different components of the industry, and also to create or move towards one silo that can actually negotiate or come together with CISA and Chifilwa and various other players. So from my point of view, I think it's basically this gives us an opportunity to work together, whatever the challenge that COVID has put in front of us. Yes, there's the runway. There's a focus on predominantly inbound, but also there's everybody in the tourism industry is looking and saying, oh, the domestic market's going to be the savior. I'm sure we'll get into that later. The last point I wanted to say, and this is not looking backwards, David, but our industry was the first industry to be affected by COVID-19 4 weeks to a month before the announcement of national disaster and actual lockdown. And by and large, we're seen in terms of the actions that are being taken by government as possibly the last sector of the economy to come out of it, which is quite a challenge for all of us. So joining hands together to address the issues, and we'll explore further what I mean about what can we do in terms of ensuring that tourism is not regarded as a junior ministry, as some people are saying, at this point in time of the challenge. But there is no doubt that we're going to have to look at aspects, both in terms of the consumer, in other words, the tourist, but also very importantly in terms of the product, and very importantly, the staff within those products and the communities within which those staff come from. That's what I'll be focusing on.
Great, thanks. I mean, I think important stuff, the issues around timing. And I mean, Adrian Gardner in our session yesterday really came and brought that whole issue around. And I think
yes,
a very important part of what underpins us, particularly with wildlife, the issue around communities and obviously the impact that tourism has through that whole impact into the economy. Okay, let's turn to Phil. Philip, can you give us your introductory comments?
Yes, thank you, David, and thanks for the invite, and my esteemed colleagues here. Nice to be in your company. I took the opportunity to sit both on the Gauteng webinar earlier in the week and also the Western Cape one. I wasn't able to sit on the KZN one yesterday, so if I make comments that were covered in there, you'll forgive me for that. Really what I want to do is touch on a couple of things that were picked up in the other webinars. I think there were some very eminent people in those who made some very significant comments, which I think are correct. And I also like to pick up on something David just alluded to at the beginning of today's session, which is really to come back to a little bit of a provincial focus. These 4 webinars have been separated amongst the 9 provinces. In our case, we are in no particular order Northern Cape, Mpumalanga and Limpopo, and I think we should give some credibility to the provinces that this webinar is representing. And I think that wasn't necessarily the case in the 2 that I attended for Gauteng and Western Cape. They made some excellent points, but largely on a more national type of basis. So I'd like to bring it back to the provinces. Yeah, I think there were a few very striking things that I picked up. The first came out of Gauteng. Rob Moore detailed it very, very well, which is in presenting our viewpoint as the industry to the powers that be in order to try and accelerate or shorten the runway and accelerate our opportunity to take off. We need to keep it, it's that KISS principle. We need to keep it simple, stupid. We need to focus on half a dozen key points around our industry, around aspects that affect our industry, around the data around our industry, to say, these are the facts, this is the significance. David said it just a moment ago, if you send a 20-page thesis on what's wrong with the plan, you're not going to get the right degree of attention. I take my hat off to Lisa and Tom Forster and the team and so on in sending out the questionnaire that they did yesterday. It was exactly right. It was a very short survey online. I completed it in less than 10 minutes. It asked about 8 or 9 key questions and came up with, at the end of the day, I'm sure, some meaningful data that Lisa will share with us. And I think that was exactly right type of approach in how we're going to accelerate down this runway. So I sort of give credit to my friend Mr. Moore in saying that we needed to take that view of keeping it simple in what we were trying to message. I think it came up in the Western Cape meeting was the power that the associations have in presenting the message, whether that's through the TVCSA, whether it's through SATSA, some of the work obviously that Lowveld and Mpumalanga have done in gathering the data. I think in all of the collective efforts in passing the information to the right ball carrier, for want of a better term, and presenting it to the ministries and ultimately to the decision makers. I think Margie Whitehouse had mentioned it, that the strength of doing that or campaigning on that through the associations, I think was absolutely most significant. Again, it came out strongly in I think both of the webinars I attended. I'm sure people have alluded to it many times, is we need not forget aviation as being most significant to all of our well-being. Access to our country, to our tourism commodities, to the international forum is key. And even Michael alluded to it now, domestic recovery and whatever, there's certainly got to be some aviation air access coming into play there if it's going to be meaningful. And I think the last point I want to make, and I'll stop it at that point, is the need for sustainability and addressing that, the role that probably we, more than most of the other provinces, play in the communities. Most of us work with, either we employ from the communities, we work in the communities, we're based in the communities, we have leases or whatever with community stakeholders and so on. I think the impact that our three provinces have on the communities and vice versa, and how negatively they've been affected in this process, is something that needs to be in that keep it simple, stupid messaging that we're sending via the associations to the decision makers. And I think if we don't bang the community drum hard enough, then we're doing a disservice to who we are and where we operate. I think that would be my view on the subject.
Well, thanks. And I mean, it's useful that you reference some of the other ones. I mean, not everybody have been able to clock in 4 days in a row. And what we've really tried to do is to progress the discussion as we've gone along and take it into different areas. So thanks very much for that. And we'll certainly come back to that economic sort of impact. Okay, Lisa, just the sort of final introductory word from your side.
Thank you, David, and very good afternoon from the Long Tom Pass. Beautiful day, panorama route. What everybody else has said, because I think that many of the thoughts that have been shared so far by the other esteemed panelists are ones that we all share. I think the important thing that I just want to say up front is that we took heed of the need to present data so that data can inform decision making. Philip told you that Lowveld undertook a SNAP survey. It's still running. We're running it for just a couple of days, and I'd like to share that with you in due course. Some of the interim results. But what I think the point here also is that in terms of respondents, how many are actually real SMME keys, small, and how the current situation is affecting them, it's quite dire. So I'd like to share that, as I said, in due course. Secondly, I think that one of the things we need to think about in our response in all the issue of protocol and so on is that health probably falls into something like safety and security. And that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have as an international destination, is the perception of safety and security. And I think that we probably need to place the COVID response in some way into that broad thinking, that maybe if we do it right, it can actually enhance our safety and security reputation going forward. And then I think there are probably a few more things that need to be talked about in terms of the value chain and how we about, business. I think a lot has been said about deposits and payments and so and cancellations there, but not a lot about payments. And I think that certainly from Mpumalanga, for part of our members are suppliers who sit at the end of the supply chain. So I think that's a point that probably needs to be raised. So for now, those are sort of my points. The other ideas will come out as it develops. Thank you. Okay.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So guys, maybe we could, just in terms of moving forward, I think the very first thing that I'd like to just pick your brains on, and it has been dealt with in some of the other ones, but it certainly hadn't had the sort of on the ground inflection that I think you guys can bring to the party, is this whole issue of timing. If we sort of lock ourselves in and accept a scenario that inbound is only going to happen at the end of next year, I'm not confident that we'll have much of an inbound industry left. And that was the point that Rob Moore made in the sort of opening session. So, if we I think really need to do in terms of getting our inputs into a document that our minister can go into bat with, we need to be putting forward an argument that says, for me, is there demand to come to South Africa from our source markets? And we don't have an international panelist on this session, but we've had 3 from some of the key markets. And, going forward, there I think very definitely will be that demand. Secondly, are the airlines that are going to be flying? Thirdly, what is the economics of air flight going to look like? And fourthly, can that airlift happen in a way that mitigates the COVID risk? So if we can get those 4 things together and we've got our protocols on the ground, then the answer is, well, how soon can we open? And, if we need to go up levels, sort of, for example. So, just want to sort of get your sort of views on this timing thing. And maybe, Nomasonto, let me start with you, because, I think that where these sessions are so useful is when we really do start talking between the public and the private sectors and have these sort of views. What is the view from the provincial government's point of view? And I know you are locked into the national discourse as well. And I think the other thing, and I'm sorry, it's my last point, but the other point that I think that we need to make is that this thing is so fluid. It was true last week and the week before is not going to be true next year. I think the sort of view is an evolving one. And I think that we can certainly take heart from the address that the president gave. I mean, a lot of people, initially were critical because there wasn't detail, but it was, for me, a fundamental win. I mean, he really spoke about the economy opening up. And I think what I was hearing him saying is he was inviting input. Come and make your case about how, when we can do these things. So with those sort of introductory comments from my side, let me come across to you, Nomasonto, and from the rest of you, just sort of think about it. Raise your hand if you want to come in after Nomasonto, and I'll come on to you.
Thanks, David. Obviously, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of models that have been thrown at all of us in the past couple of weeks. There's webinars, there's presentations that we've seen, and the reality is that the way our sector is structured, the government, from a health point of view, they are looking from the actual pandemic and the ability to spread, and how can then that be avoided. So in the many meetings that we have seen presentations telling us that, maybe we'll start operating domestically towards the end of the year. And obviously everybody is up in arms. But I also take some comfort from this week in terms of what the president was saying. I was in another meeting this morning which is starting to say, if we are able to do what I was saying earlier, to demonstrate to government this adaptability that I talk about, to say, what do we need to change? What do we need to show that we are able to control the spread of this pandemic within, obviously, our sector, and our sector across the whole value chain. So what would the protocols be like? And I talk about adaptability because I'm saying it's not necessarily looking at maybe the next couple of weeks just to open and maybe we're gonna do stuff and stop. Because the argument is that maybe life is not necessarily about post-COVID. Maybe it's about living with COVID. So we've got to put things in place that can be sustainable to actually adapt and have new ways of working. So what are these protocols that we could put in place that would give confidence to government that we will have a handle of this when they actually allow us to open? So I think from the meeting that I've had this morning, which was quite high level, they were talking about within this level 3, which is coming very soon in the next few weeks, perhaps there are parts of tourism that are less of a risk that can open. The question is, what would those areas be? And I think in the previous webinars, people have started saying, look, if you go on a self-drive within the Kruger, what risk are you putting through there? Because there's social distancing, you are in your car with your family, you are not interacting in a group. So areas like self-drives, like self-catering, they can start to be put forward as areas where we will be able to control. Obviously, there's other things that we need to think about. I mean, from a SATSA point of view, when you start thinking about social distancing, what does it mean in a transport sector, for example, which becomes quite a tricky one? What does it mean in terms of aviation? So I think if we are able to put these adaptive strategies and have a very solid plan, I think we are not looking at a December opening. I think slowly the tourism industry will be allowed, from all the conversation I've had this week in the past 48 hours, to actually be able to open within this level 3. I think the challenge though is what the president said, which was it could be that one province is in one level and another is in another level. So we have to also make sure that, you know, at that time when they open, there is this inter-provincial travel that is possible. Because from where I'm sitting as a CEO of tourism, if we don't have inter-provincial travel, it's going to be difficult to do any work on tourism, because effectively travel will not necessarily be able to happen in terms of the work, the mandate that we have. However, you know, at a small scale, your business travel can start to happen. So I think that once the models, if they put these models and the systems are telling us that if you put the tourism sector, it takes us to as far as December, at least from a domestic point of view. But I think if we really apply our minds and look at these hygiene protocols, tracking and tracing that they are talking about, with social distancing, all these factors, and we are able to demonstrate that we have changed and we've adapted and we are able to adapt, then it will help us to shorten this lead time to reopening the sector.
Great, Nomasanta. So that's lovely. So I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the meeting this morning, was that the MINMEC meeting with the minister? So I mean, just to...
I'm not saying...
But I mean, it's just useful for people in the private sector, because often these meetings, but I mean, it's so encouraging to hear your feedback and to, you know, be able to sort of share it with the people on the sort of panel that there's certainly an adaptability in terms of how government initially took a view and how they're going forward. And I think, you know, in terms of the urgency with things opening up, you know, this thing at the end of May, that is our line in the sand. That's when we've got to have our very sharp, focused argument ready to put forward for the sector. And I'm looking at some of the comments. Dave Rieger, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Dave, was sort of talking about the protocol. So we've done, through the TBC and TBC says all associations, we pulled a whole together around that. Those protocols have now been published. There's a task team set up that is going to be doing two things. It's going to be taking people's input. Now, if people feel whatever's been published doesn't meet the requirements or is short on detail in certain areas, please comment into us. Already today, we're getting comments from certain of the value chain. But the beauty of that is it does deal with all the touch points along the tourism value chain. And then the very important job of that task team is how do we operationalize these? So how do we subscribe to them? Is it a self-regulatory model? Do people fill in a form? Is there a stamp of approval? But we've got to have some way in which we as an industry subscribe to these protocols, and then on the back of that we can market the experiences with some degree of sort of confidence. But anybody want to come in now on the timing? Sorry, anybody raising hands? Lisa, and then Evelyn.
Thanks, David. I think it might be relevant to just chuck out some of the numbers that we've got in provisionally, because it relates to timing. We asked some very basic, straightforward questions of our members and others, people involved in tourism, in other words, people whose main income for their business is from business. It's very interesting. I'm not going to go through it in great detail.
Lisa, sorry to interrupt you, Lisa, but your connection seems to be a little bit poor. So if you wouldn't mind putting your video off and just doing the audio, and then we've got a better connection.
The thing is that 90. Yeah.
Hey guys, so Lisa, if you wouldn't mind putting your video off because your connection is a little bit disrupted. If you put your video off, we'll probably be able to hear your audio a bit better.
Okay, I'm off, and I'll just run it by you quickly. Since lockdown, has your revenue decreased? 94% people said yes, and 86% of the respondents said between 80 and 100%. I think the key thing in terms of timing is if the domestic market would open in late 2020, which is the original timelines put out, would you make it? Would your business survive? 53% said no, 41% said maybe, and 6% said yes. And if the timeline is pushed out to when the international market would be allowed to move in early 2021, 62% of the business said they wouldn't make it, 31 said maybe, and 7% said yes. So what it means in a worst case scenario, if we don't move the timelines, we're going to have 6% of our tourism plant left in our area. So we have to move the timelines. And how do we do that? Obviously with the protocols, but I just wanted to give that number in so that it gives a sense of reality to our neck of the woods.
Thanks, Lisa. Evelyn, can we come across to you?
Yeah, I want to raise 2 points because in our province, the team at Limpopo also has done a fantastic survey last week. It was interesting, particularly because it was the formal sector as well as the informal sector that has been invited to participate. And I think similar kind of figures come out looking at the question, if this crisis continues to happen, will your company go out of business? Looking for 3 months, 6 months, and in a year. And basically, that also means similar figures as Lisa just presented. So it's very obvious that this runway needs to be as short and as short as possible. The one comment, or the one thing I also wanted to comment on is, David, you mentioned, what is the demand? Is there actually demand for traveling? And I think on a domestic level, we don't really have those figures, because as SATSA, we deal with international travelers and not so much with domestic. For myself, my business is also an incoming tour operator / DMC. So you mainly deal with international markets, and to all of a sudden switch to domestic, it's not really realistic. I don't have the means to get into that market, and definitely not at this short period of time. So I can only comment on the demand on an international level, which will of course be later in the timeline that they will be able to travel. But if I look at what we've done in our business, and I think it ties in with what I wanted to raise when it comes to consumer confidence and supplier confidence, because that ties in with the demands. And I think us as tour operators, travel agents, but also us as products, this really is a very, very important time to stay close to our consumers, to our travelers. It is so important that us as product owners and business owners, but also us as a destination, keeps that confidence in South Africa going. What we have done after we recovered from the shock and horror of everything that happened, and we crawled away from under that rock that I decided to hide under for a while, we sent out a newsletter to all our direct clients, just very plain, telling Ingrid is in lockdown, my colleague is in lockdown in Hout Bay, how does she survive? I'm in lockdown on my farm well, not my farm, but a farm in Seneen. How do we survive? And just talking to our customers, making sure that they know we are still here. We are ready to operate as soon as you can travel. They all reacted very positively, and the overall feedback was they are so ready to travel, especially if you're dealing with European markets. They also gone through this crisis, but not many of them have lost their complete livelihoods. Like here, there is still a lot of budget available to travel, and there is the will to travel. Many of my clients that have had bookings in the coming months, they've postponed, and they all said to me they cannot wait to come because they see it, they deserve it. They've made it through this crisis, and they deserve to spoil themselves with a holiday, because in European countries, holiday is higher on the list of basic needs. It's for them, it's a basic need. So for us, we've seen that it's very important to stay close to your customers. And I think that's a message that I want to put out today. Communicate, instill that trust that we are still there. And maybe it's a little bit of bluffing. We will get through this. We will look after you as soon as you are ready to travel. We are here to assist you. And in the meantime, come to us with your questions. Even though we don't have the answers, we can at least tell you what's happening on our side of the world. So as tour operators, as travel agents, we've got a big role to play in keeping this destination on top of people's minds and instilling that confidence and that trust. Having said that, us as operators now taking the time to look at our product portfolio, and we're going out to all the suppliers saying, what are your rates for next year? How are you guys doing? Again, to keep that communication going. And I also want to feel that confidence and trust on that side of the line, even though it's very, very hard to know what's going on. And it's been quite shocking in certain instances how it's being dealt with. You send out an email to ask for rates, and a lot of them you get automatic responses saying we're working on skeleton staff and please give us a bit of extra time to reply. Perfectly fine. So you can reply to me in 2 days, in 3 days, still acceptable in these days. But there's hotels, accommodation providers, transport providers, activity providers that just simply don't answer their emails. So how does that instill confidence in them as product owners and in them as what they're offering to us? So I think everybody that is part of this industry needs to realize we need to stick together and we need to put it out there. If you feel like you need to close down, at least tell us. this is what's going on. If you don't have your rates ready for next year, it's perfectly fine, but communicate. I think this confidence part works towards the traveler, overseas and domestic, but it also is within our industry. We need to be able to rely on each other, and only then we can get onto that runway to recover. As long as we know we're all there, we all talk to each other. And my question or my request to the suppliers out there is please answer your emails, basically.
Thanks, Evelyn. Great. Michelle, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks, David. A couple of points. I think going back to Nomasanto, about the point on sustainability and agree about the protocols. I'm glad that there are meetings being held at top level, even though Nomasanto, I understand you can't divulge, but maybe there's a time in South Africa for more transparency going forward, not from you, but from the powers that be. I think that when you talk about sustainability, David, and you look across the industry, I'm not talking about just the big companies. I mean, you speak to Rob Moore Hotels, and that they are a fairly large group. But you go and look at the individual SMME operating right throughout the country. I happen to know some of them in the Northern Cape, as well as in Mpumalanga, and most certainly in Limpopo, which is an under-visited province, sadly. Is that these SMMEs know about sustainability, because for years, for them to continue surviving as a business pre-COVID, they know what they need to do. So in turn, what I'm saying, I agree with Nomasanto about, should we be able to, and I think we need to drive to have tourism moved away from level 1 to possibly level 3. And if you have the confidence, but the industry, the products themselves, understanding the protocols, SATSA's done great work. You've had inputs from Singapore hotels, from WHO, from various organizations worldwide, best practice from fair trade and sustainable tourism organizations in Europe, etc. We've got all these things, and I believe that the products, again at SMME level, they understand what sustainability is. So they will be so determined to ensure that the protocols, and I don't want to go into the specific details, but they understand this word of sustainability. They don't need to be told by a central authority how to be sustainable. I believe that the SMMEs, especially in the tourism industry, would be able to manage these protocols to a level which is acceptable to any visitor, be it the South African domestic or the international. Because believe me, from the point that Nomasanto said, don't talk about post-COVID, let's talk about living with COVID. 60% of us have had it or are going to get it anyway worldwide. So we have to learn how to adapt. But we're going to get given requirements, most certainly from European travel laws, etc., about what are your protocols when my visitor comes through here. So I believe that we can prove to government that we would be able to manage the protocols required to operate and open up the businesses, not waiting for level 1. That's the first point. The second point I want to answer is in terms of Evelyn, in terms from the tour operating point of view. I think, and there's been numerous debates within the industry between, let's say, products or suppliers to the channel, the tour operating travel agent, online booking, e-booking, etc. I think what is also coming is the big discussion on issues as, number one, what is the commission structure that, especially in the game lodge safari industry, has been really in the laps of the channels, in the lap of the tour operators and the tourism channel. People are starting to discuss and saying, well, in terms of the channel going forward, does the industry need to pay as much? Can we not debate more? Can we not discuss the opportunity of the booking platforms and the role of the tourism channel, the booking channel, looking at commissions, looking at an aspect of certain tour operators paying 30 days after guests have traveled. Now, at the moment, and I don't want to look backwards, David, but there are many SMMEs who still to this day have refunded money in good faith to their client, be it the tour operator or to the guest who traveled directly themselves. They've refunded. But I know of SMMEs who still have outstanding payments. They have not been paid by tour operators for services that were rendered in March. So I think this COVID story is going to allow us to recalibrate, if that's the word, with the relationship of not how we market, but how are we going forward to do business, especially from an SMME point of view, because the SMMEs right now need to sustain themselves over the next couple of months. Give them the chance, give government or whoever the industry says, these are the protocols that you've got to have in place, be it transport, be it accommodation, be it whatever the situation. These are the protocols. I believe that let's have confidence in the private sector for them to manage, not regulate, but manage it, because they can do it, because they understand sustainability. Second point, and this is not against you, Evelyn, but generally speaking, the relationship between products and the booking channel is going to be relooked at, I think, in the near future, because that's also going to lead to it's a sustainability question. But that might not be discussed right now, but possibly when everything else opens up.
Phil, I'm going to come to you, but just in terms of steering the conversation, I think the whole rates thing, Mish, it's so crucial. We had quite a bit of it in some of the other panels, but I'm cognizant about half an hour left here, and what I really want to do, because of getting back to our thing, and talk a little bit about the regional stuff, and I think we've got some quite exciting stuff to talk about in terms of some regional initiatives. But Phil, do you want to, is your comment on the rates issue, or can we move across to, you want to just come in quickly? Yeah, come in quickly, and then I'll take it back to talk about some of the regional positive stuff we can be looking at.
Yeah, correct. Just very quickly, and I don't disagree with the comments made by either Evelyn or Michael. They are valid comments, and they have their, without being too blunt, they have their time and place. As we stand at the moment, we talk about this runway and getting down the runway. It stands to reason that we are not going to get international travel opened up before we have got interprovincial travel opened up, and for that matter, even regional travel opened up. I mean, I think that stands to reason. I myself predominantly rely on the international market, don't get me wrong. But I think we're missing a point in harping on that our focus should be around our customer and how we communicate and rates and this and that and whatever. If we don't open as an industry in some way, shape or form and begin to operate and provide a service to domestic, regional, interprovincial customers, whether they are our normal customers or not, we will not be able to prove to the government and to the decision makers that A, we are able to follow the necessary protocols of living in a COVID world, B, that we are able to be professional businesses, C, that we beneficiate the communities and so on. Whilst I might not, again, in my business, operate strongly in the domestic market, if the Kruger Park doesn't open up, by example, and begin to operate, and community members who work there in whatever capacity begin to earn salaries, and the economy does not start at a domestic and regional level, we will never get to an opening date for international travel. And so we all have even while it might not be our individual personal markets, we have a vested interest in making sure that we do get the park open, we do get panorama sightseeing open, we do get Northern Cape activities open, all of which, as people have stated, are very attuned to social distancing. But we have to, and again, it was mentioned in previous webinars, the domestic market is not the savior of our industry, but it is most definitely the guinea pig upon which we are going to test our protocols and systems in order to prove to a body of decision makers that we are ready and capable to accept international tourists, which for most of us might be our everyday business. If we don't go through the hoops to get to the end goal, we will not achieve it. And I think we need to focus on, yes, of course, customers are key and paramount, but customers will come and visit certain products and attractions and so on. If those products and attractions don't exist because they have gone out of business, then it stands to reason that we have put the cart before the horse. We must preserve suppliers, attractions, businesses, SMMEs, communities, etc., as an absolute priority now, so that we can prove we're ready for our more everyday customers that we're looking for. And, so I tend to disagree with some of the commentary around putting out. It was strongly mentioned in the Western Cape, for example, that the key was our customer. Our customer is key, of course, but at this moment in time, our product, if our product doesn't survive until the customer arrives, well, what good was it to prioritize the customer? You know, we need to look after the preservation of the individual businesses and SMMEs and so on, and open those up at whatever level to prove that we can operate.
Well, I think great points. You know, and please never feel embarrassed about disagreeing. I mean, we're not. This is only through discussion and debate that we're going to get there. But let me hand over to perhaps Nomasanto, Evelyn. I don't know who wants to kick off. Do you want to tell us a bit about some practical, interesting stuff that we can start doing? Because I think it's so important that while we are tackling these big issues, and rightly so, that we don't lose sight of activities and showcasing stuff between ourselves in the interim. So I'm not sure who wants to lead the charge.
Thank you, David. It's a tough one because we've got organizations and we've got sort of different challenges. I mean, one of the challenges that you know, we have lamented about in other forums, not so public, is the fact that you know, our budget has been cut. So we are busy negotiating and really trying to put forward the point that says, in a crisis, we need to remain visible. So I do agree to that point, and perhaps we need to look at how innovative we can be in maintaining that visibility. If you look at you know, social media, it has played a critical part in just keeping the dream and keeping sort of travel alive. And certainly, I think we can do more in that space. I mean, in the province, we had a meeting this week with our stakeholders. We're going to have more meetings again because we want to look at creative ideas on what we can do. I spoke earlier, I said innovation is one of the things that I'm looking at. So for me, it's about what are the innovative itineraries we're going to come out with out of this COVID? What have we learned from COVID that, you know, we can take back into our normal lives? I mean, people have now appreciated outdoors. We've spent time trying to say, you know, Limpopo is fantastic. You've got this organic, fresh oxygen. You can come and relax. Now people have got a new respect for natural spaces, for outdoor spaces. And I think it gives us an opportunity going forward to say, as soon as we are able to, our messages must be pushed in terms of a creative and innovative itineraries. But I'm also thinking from a point of view of the millennials, you know, a new younger market that we really need to look at inspiring and say, what can they do when they come to our provinces? Because I think what COVID has done as well, it has pushed the fact that, you know, the older people are at risk, they want to stay home, so they might not come out quite quickly in terms of, you know, going out and seeing the world again. I'm not talking about the panel because we are all young, but I think the younger ones, The younger ones want to be able to go out there, and we need to be creative. But the other thing that from a destination marketing point of view that we have been criticized over and over, and if there's any members that are on the participants listening, is that coming to Limpopo, people are saying it's expensive. So when I talk about, adaptability, what are we gonna do in terms of innovative pricing strategies to actually attract people in terms of value for money and not really being seen as exclusive? I mean, I followed a conversation, people saying, no, they'd rather go, to XYZ destinations I won't mention, instead of coming to, some of our luxurious bush lodges because of the price. So pricing is going to be quite critical. And I think I keep on using the word, we can't be tone deaf in what we do and how we communicate going forward. And what I mean about tone deaf is that on the one hand, people have lost jobs, people are hungry, this whole thing has been more painful, they've lost lives through this process. On the other hand, we have to use tourism to inspire the economy and try to get it working again. So we must strike a balance in terms of how we then communicate our destinations in a sensitive and calm way than being more aggressive in such a way that we offend people during this very, very difficult time. I mean, some people are really not going to make it, and I think it's a reality that we know. But I think we have a role to play in slowly building that confidence into that. David, just before I hand over to you, I spoke about connectivity, and I know a lot of the SATSA members are talking about inbound. Immediately we open our domestic, we know that the region will also follow soon before our long haul will also come through. And I've written maybe Africa cultural tourism being a huge opportunity going forward. And I say this because for a very long time, people have traveled from abroad to come and experience the African dream. But our own Africans have not traveled to understand each other's culture. I made an example that, I'm sitting here, I don't know maybe all the cultures happening in the Northern Cape. But equally in Ghana, in Botswana, as well as Kenya and all other, Rwanda and all these places. So maybe we need to be creative about connecting Africa, uniting Africa in the short to medium term before we can be focusing on our long haul. And that's just a thought that I've had around, connectivity beyond just, people, digital partnerships and all those things, but really looking at how do we break down the borders within Africa. Obviously, that will need aviation and it will need good pricing and in terms of, I know it can be quite expensive, but I think aviation will have a role to play in that space. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Nomasanto. So Evelyn, bringing it down to practicalities, because when we do these things, I think it's important that we focus on the big stuff, but there are a lot of people here that are saying, what does this mean for me? I'm a small business in Limpopo, or I've got a thing, I understand all of this stuff, but what can we do practically in the sort of days and weeks ahead that can, just help give people that sense of hope and that sense of being connected to an opening up that's going to be coming?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very important to realize that one does not exclude the other. The survival of the industry, of course, is key. Like Philip alluded to, that is very, very important. Businesses must stay in business, and we need to shorten the runway as much as we can. But to instill that consumer confidence is equally important, and that can happen at the same time. And at the same time, we can look at destination marketing. And I think, as Nomasanto actually started off by saying, we need to look at being innovative and creative. That's what we've been trying to do in the last couple of days, because just before everything came down on us, we were supposed to have a mega fam in Limpopo, focusing around what we have labeled the Route 71, which is the R71 between Polokwane and Paleboa, and also going to Hoedspruit. we are busy pitching that area as a new route. And we had weeks and weeks and weeks of work done to invite 32 operators to the area to come and showcase what we've got. And unfortunately, we had to cancel that. It didn't happen. And we were hoping to maybe do that later in the year, but reality is, once the industry opens, I don't think there is a lot of operators that will be able to leave the business for 4 days and travel and go on a joel, because it was, apart from a learning curve, it was going to be a lot of fun, because we're all going to have to focus on our businesses and survive and trying to recover some of the business that we've lost. So what better way to now look at digital platforms? I think all of us have updated ourselves a lot on all the Zoom and other options that are out there. So what we've decided to do is to take this mega fam that was ready to start and to take it to the digital platform. So we will be having a mega fam, which is virtual, and it's going to be around the Route 71. It's going to happen on the 28th of May. Very soon, in 13 days, and we are basically doing the same as what we were supposed to do physically. We will be inviting tour operators, travel agents to sign up, and we will be taking you through the area to learn about this beautiful area between, like I said, Polokwane and Phalaborwa Hoedspruit, which is an area that is very, very suitable for domestic travel and international travel. It's a beautiful link between Gauteng basically and the Lowveld. So invites will go out next week from SATSA. All the tour operators and travel agents will be invited to join, and it will be hopefully a positive start of being busy with the industry that we love, being busy with something positive while we are still busy fighting for all the important things that we have mentioned earlier on. But at the same time, we can make sure that our knowledge stays up, increases, so that when people are ready to travel, we are ready to offer these kind of products.
Looks like
We
David
lost David.
Maybe he slipped off to get some early wine before our coffee chat at 5 o'clock. I hope everybody's joining us for our coffee chat, but I see Michelle's put his hand up. Michelle, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I don't want to, because
sorry, Mish, can I just come in there? Sorry, I got my connectivity lost out. Just before you come in there, let me just say, Evelyn, if I may, that this whole mega fam put together is really in partnership with the Limpopo Parks and Tourism, and they've been an important funder and partner of that. And obviously we're able to try and do this in a cost-effective way. But the other point being, and I understand this is going to be a virtual one, and I think it's great to kick off like that. But one of the suggestions that came out of some of the other work is, as we go forward, I think we should be doing more of these. And here we're talking about, this is the inbound community. So we're looking at DMCs, everything else. And, if and when we are able to interprovincial travels able to take place, what we really should be doing is leading the charge and getting our DMCs to actually get into whatever form of transport opens up and going and almost doing a social media publicity around it to show South Africans and the world that you can go and do these things, so that we almost get our industry to become travel leaders, to show that we can get out to, as I say, to sort of various parts and to show people that tourism can take place. Anyway, Joyce, my 2 pence there. Mish, back to you.
Yeah, I didn't want to appear to dominate, because Lisa, I hope I'm not taking your time, or Philip, or anybody else. But Nomasonto, I think, firstly, I think you've been a breath of fresh air into Limpopo. I'm a Limpopo homeboy. Thank you very much, because Limpopo and Evelyn and the entire team, it's great what you're doing. And I think that Northern Cape also falls under that category of less visited province. And I've been privileged to work around Andriesvale and Kalahari with the Komani Sun, etc. And this is a great opportunity. And what you're doing, I commend you, Limpopo. Lisa and the Kruger Lofeld, thanks very much also for your efforts. MTPA, I'm sorry that you couldn't join us. Take the lead from Limpopo. They're doing fantastic work. Just on the virtual issue, and I wanted to mention to Evelyn, it's great to hear this, Dave, because being involved with Djuma Game Reserve, obviously it is the host of something called Wild Earth Safaris, which is a virtual safari which has become viral. I hate to use that word, but it has boomed like you cannot believe. CNN, CBS, carte blanche, everybody have done coverage, and there's been this huge drive to actually log in and have a look at the 2 safaris every day. Now, Yuri Mulman, the owner of Djuma, and I have been discussing and looking at the expansion of the virtual safari, but the virtual experience in this time of lockdown, but even going into the future, is a huge marketing opportunity. And I don't know, for the listeners, the viewers out there, there's something called Airbnb experiences and TripAdvisor experiences where you can log on and you can go and do a virtual tour on a scooter for 10 people, paying 500 Rand a person for an hour, a trip around Paris, for example. We did one last week called Dogs of Chernobyl, of all things. This guy who has been looking after the dogs around Chernobyl, and it's an hour. There are 10 of you, you book on it. It costs 952 Rand, and there are only 10 of you can log in. And we had to, you book it, and we had to wait 3 weeks to get a spot for this 1 hour experience. Now, these are just ideas, and what I'm saying, so I commend you, Evelyn, I commend you, Nomasonto and Limpopo. I'm so proud that my home province is leading the way. We need to look at these innovative ways for this period now during COVID, but also going forward in terms of the platform and the use of this virtual tourism experience, because I think that's where the growth is going to come, and it's a huge opportunity which we have not even tapped into yet from a safari point of view. It's not only Djuma. Obviously, there are guys like Tinswalo and various others who started, Tandatula, the Scots, doing fantastic work. Huge followings, guys, and these guys are potentially going to become physical tourists in the future. People who've never watched or looked at it, and it's a great platform for the country as a whole, but in the so-called marginal, I hate using that, Northern Cape, Limpopo, guys, we've got such a wealth of tourism product up in the Venda area, the Rabola Arts and Crafts route, which Love Limpopo have done, etc. Some of the smaller cultural experiences that you speak of, Nomasonto, amazing. And I commend all of you and thank you for what you're doing.
Mish, that's the brilliant points, and I mean, sure, some really innovative thoughts. So Phil and Disa, you guys are down in Mpumalanga. Just some sort of thoughts from you. I mean, I don't want to make this a competitive thing, but you know, we as SATSA just really willing to work with you guys to see how we can extend this and you know, start sort of opening up and sharing and just keeping alive and re-energizing some thoughts around product, because I mean you know, Mpumalanga, you know, just being the gateway into Kruger, the traditional gateway into Kruger, let me say that, is, you know, obviously receives quite a big share of the particularly the international market. But you know what we saw with the garden route when we started this mega fan process is everybody thought they knew the garden route. Once you take the DMCs out there, they're actually blown away because there's new product, and you know, product managers sitting in urban areas don't always get out. So I think there's huge legs to that. And I mean, Michelle, that sort of point you made about getting these sort of virtual tours out and getting some revenue in at the same time, I think is massively exciting. Lisa, Phil, who wants to make a comment?
Yeah, David, I mean, I think if to try and bring it back to the 3 provinces we're discussing today and about, I think one's got to turn the button on that we start to operate in some way, shape or form, because I said before, I rely on international tourists, but you know, if our area is not working, if the R40 is congested with demonstrations from local communities around unrestful situations because the establishments that they work at are not operating, if the spaza shops are not selling cool drinks and ice creams and people cannot stop along Route 71 or Route 40 or whatever it is to enjoy their experience, then the whole thing tends to grind to a halt. And I come back to that need to turn on some sort of operation at every level. We're all ourselves domestic consumers of tourism experiences, whether it's to go off and view our own activities along the panorama route, or the motorcyclists who want to go on a breakfast run and stop at Misty Mountain for breakfast, or whatever the story is. Each one of us is a consumer as well as an industry person, and if we don't have those provincial, even within our province, if we don't have people enjoying the parks, playing a round of golf, whatever it is, aside from anything else, I truly believe it does an enormous amount for our own personal mental health. If during this lockdown period people had been allowed to go on a self-drive to the Kruger Park, where they were not permitted to go anywhere except in the gate, around the park and out the gate, not allowed to stop, not allowed to pass go, do not collect 200 Rand, you would have had enormous numbers of participants who would have wanted to do that for their own social well-being or their own mental well-being, would have generated park entrance fees for the park, would have generated cool drink sales along the way, or whatever the story is. It would have started our tourism economy. And I think our responsibility in all of our provinces, our responsibility as the associations or whatever, is to lobby the decision makers that we can start at some level in stage 3 under all of the necessary protocols that the world has identified. We can prove and demonstrate that we are a first world tourism a country in terms of being able to follow those protocols, and we can demonstrate ultimately to our international consumers that we're trying to attract that, look, we've been doing it locally for 60 days, 90 days, whatever the story is, come back and enjoy our beautiful country. Last couple of points, and they were made by in past webinars, but I think it's important to make them again. We have an opportunity with Q4 upcoming, which is high season for all of us. If we don't open at some level now, we will miss Q4. And I think if we miss Q4 for most of us as a tourism business with a international focus or whatever, we will certainly be a lot worse for the experience. A lot of people have said, everything is about tourism unusual. I think we need to look also at the region and at what some of our competitors have done. It was mentioned earlier in the week, American air access already taking place into Nairobi, Addis Ababa. There was news on Wednesday, I think it was, that Tanzania had said we are open for tourism business as of the 1st of June. If we look to our neighboring states, to Victoria Falls, to Namibia, to Mozambique on our doorstep, to the Delta, wherever it is, a lot of those tourism destinations, those tourism attractions, have a reliance upon certainly our air hub connectivity, our Tambo, as obviously a central point, Cape Town as well. If we don't get some activity that starts to show that those places are still the most meaningful air hubs that we have, then our regional neighbors and partners and whatever are equally going to suffer enormously, which has a negative knock-on effect for us. The comment I think was made, Michelle must know it and whatever, the number of people who come to our destination who are also visiting a province, multiple provinces, 2 countries, 4 countries, whatever it is. If you've come all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, it's a very long way to come. You have made sure that you have ticked all of those experience boxes along the way, from Victoria Falls to Cape Town to the Delta, Namibia, whatever it is. And so we have to collectively see how we get this engine started. to go back to David's runway analogy, we can only take off if the engine is started. We need to at least start the engine. It needs to be warmed up. It needs to be ready to go. The runway needs to be shorter. Every minute, every day that we're not operating is another day that is working against us.
David?
Thanks so much. Natalia, you wanted to just come in and move on to some possible questions that have been posed. So let me hand over to you.
Sure, we don't have a lot of time left. Santo, if I could just ask you to unmute yourself. Marion has posed a question in the chat, which I think would probably be relevant for you to answer. Marion from Moxwari. And she said, can we have some support in widening the viewers to our virtual safari? So Michelle was talking about his virtual safari. She's wanting to know if from a tourist authority DMO perspective, you would be able to provide some support to amplify that.
Yes, certainly. Please just share my details with them, and then we can definitely see how we can support. We would like to be contacted for any possible support proposals, if there's any, and then we'll be able to respond in terms of how we can, because we've got our own marketing platforms which are doing quite well, so we can definitely support such initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Santo. David, over to you.
Yeah, great, guys. I mean, we're getting towards the end of it. We've probably got 5 minutes left. I'm just going to, if anybody wants to make a last sort of comment, I think it's been a particularly useful session, and I think we've sort of got into areas and touched on stuff that we haven't covered in the other sessions, but probably haven't got a time to go around to everybody. But Lisa, you back with us as your connectivity improved. Perhaps just a sort of final comment from you before I close.
Thank you, David. Apologies, my connection is having a Friday afternoon sleep. I think that I think we also need to understand that the world is not all what it seems. And if we also dig deep into some of the numbers and the people that move around, I mean, the age of travel, the age of a traveler is the travelers are getting younger. Look at our stats, look at our arrivals, look at the arrivals from Brazil, for example. These from an international point of view, you know, we need to maybe be looking at these as emerging markets with COVID, because these people are intrepid. We know they're self-drivers, they're activity junkies, they love the outdoors, they do all sorts of things. So I think that we need to also understand that, you know, instead of necessarily only looking at the 60 to 70-year-old American market, maybe we also need to be looking at some of these emerging markets from an international perspective. And I also think that we've got a great emerging market domestically. I see it certainly in our own product, because we have about 40% of our market is domestic. And we've got a very different client profile. We had, you know, 2 months ago, a very different client profile to what we had 3 years ago. And that's encouraging. And I believe it will come back. We just need to get product back so that we know that we can operate. And testing the protocols here on our, you know, on our own, with our own domestic market is going to be hugely valuable to us. So we need to get going as soon as possible. That's all I can say. And I will share the statistics that we are gathering at the moment with SATSA. Thank you, David. Okay, guys. Well, that brings it to an end. And I want to just thank you all so much for your time and your insights. And yeah, before, just to echo Michelle's words, Nomasanta, you, I think, not only a breath of fresh air, a real tonic, and definitely, I mean, it's a bit, I don't know if you ever used to watch Strictly Come Dancing, the guy would say, you're my favorite provincial CEO. So thanks so much for being with us, and just a great panel and energy from this part of the world, and just thanks for all the comments and the participation from guys in the Northern Cape. We haven't forgotten about you. Also one of the coolest places. And when you're thinking about wide open spaces and,
you know, a post sort of living with COVID sort of world, the Northern Cape comes to mind. And, you know, I think Venice, you've had your time. The new place is the Northern Cape. So, guys, we're going to pull this together. We're going to get that document to the minister by the end of May. And I think it's going to be really interesting because that document will be shared. And I think it's going to be so important because we've often spoken about collaboration. We often speak about partnerships, but we world champions at the what. I think we're the worst in the world at the how. But what we've been able to pull together through this whole process is we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the how, and we're doing it together. And I think that is important. And I think the synergies of forging a good document, not crafting it, forging it, are going to be in the, you know, the proof's going to be in the pudding. And I think we're going to come up with a great product. But thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and to everybody who's been with us, not only this afternoon, but through the week. And we hope that you've all got your invites for the chat room, because after a long week, I'm looking forward to a beer. Thanks.
Thanks, David. I've just pasted the link if you haven't registered for the coffee catch-up, although coffee on a Friday afternoon, you must have lost your minds. Hopefully you still have some booze left, and hopefully we can see you in 3 minutes' time on our coffee catch-up. Thank you, David. Thank you, panelists, for a great discussion. And thank you to all of you who logged on a Friday afternoon to share those insights. If you have any other insights, you can send those to communications@satsa.co.za. And I'm putting it in there as well, communications@satsa.co.za. Have a lovely weekend and hope to see you in 3 minutes. Cheers.